Fred Heid is today's guest on Todd's podcast, and I want to welcome you here today. He is the Polk County Public School Superintendent, and he came to us in April 2021 during the height of COVID. Talk about challenges. In his leadership role, he oversees one of the 30 largest school districts in the United States and the 7th largest in Florida, serving more than 110,000 students pre-K through 12th grade. He holds a master's degree in educational leadership from the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and is pursuing a doctorate in educational leadership from Aurora University. He's a Bigfoot fanatic, I understand, and you can thank your Deputy Superintendent, Tom Selleck, for that one, and we'll talk a little bit more about that during our interview. Mr. Heid is married, has a teenage son that lives here in Lakeland, and I think you said your mom's living with you right now.
That's correct.
And 3 dogs and a cat?
3 dogs and a cat.
Wow. So that stuffed antelope to the left of your shoulder is really not that disconcerting.
It is not at all.
All right, good. First, can I call you Fred?
Please.
All right, thank you, Fred. We want to talk, it's a casual conversation, find out a little about your background, where you come from, and kind of what makes you, and then we'll talk about some of the issues if you're okay with that.
Please.
Where are you from originally?
Born and raised in Miami, Florida. Spent almost all my entire life there. Graduated from Southwest Miami Senior High, go Eagles.
Go Eagles.
And started actually in the aviation industry, but we can get into that later.
Yeah.
Met my wife. She had come down to the University of Miami to study physical therapy. She's from New York. And we got married, moved to Sarasota. I began my career in education. Moved from Sarasota to Orlando to Tallahassee. I was recruited to be the bureau chief for school improvement based off my successful turnaround experience, improving low-performing schools. And as a result of that, ended up as a deputy superintendent in Duval County Public Schools, and figured, well, after 2 years of that, if I was going to work that hard, I might as well be the superintendent. So I began my search.
Good.
And ended up in Illinois for a brief period of time.
And then you came to us.
Yes, sir.
So in high school, were you a good student?
You know, I was a C student.
I was barely a C student.
And I think, quite honestly, that's what's made me a good educator. Is I think I kind of approach it from the perspective of why was I disengaged as a student,
right?
And how do I help address that? But I never struggled in school academically, just had good memorization, good aptitude as far as problem solving, and had a great high school experience. Played a lot of sports.
What sports did you play?
I was a football and wrestler.
What position?
I was offensive guard.
Okay.
I was a pulling guard because I was shorter than most.
So you're not the tallest person in the room,
not.
but you certainly got a stockier build.
Yes, sir.
I had a buddy that was president of Florida Realtors, and he's about 6 feet, maybe 220 at his heaviest days, but I think in high school he was probably $175. He got a scholarship to go to FSU as an offensive lineman, and he showed me his thing. And I said, RJ, you wouldn't even be a punter or a kicker with the size you are now. So were you any good at football?
I was okay.
How about wrestling?
Wrestling, I was, Florida sports wrestling, was new for us and a new sport. I never, unlike up north in Illinois, when you're up there, kids start at age 3 wrestling. Right. So high school wrestling, I didn't start until my sophomore year. And it was a good off-season sport for me because you had to play off-season sports, and I preferred that versus track.
Were any service clubs or other extracurricular activities, or was it, hey, all I got time for is sports and maybe a high school job on the side?
Sports and employment, quite honestly. I worked a lot. I was raised in a household where, my father and my stepfather both instilled a strong work ethic.
Right.
And so that's exactly what I did. So in my off hours, I spent time at work.
So when you got out of college, if you got out of high school, you went to college, did you always want to get into education when you got out? I mean, I was a C student, and you say you could do it. I always got distracted. That was my downfall. I still get very distracted. This is before we knew what ADHD was. And but did you just say, I really think I want to follow a career path into education? I want to do something to help these kids.
So I can't miss the opportunity. You remember the cure for ADHD when we were kids was a smack in the back of the head.
I got my
there was
share
no
of
pill.
licks.
There was no pill for that.
I was good friends with the coach and the principal.
Actually, in high school, I fell in love with architecture.
Really?
And studied that a great deal. And then as I first went into college, that was going to be my major. But my father was in the aviation industry, and we sold avionics. Father owned a company. We sold everything from avionics, instrumentation, hydraulics, everything but engines from 707 up to a 777. And at one point, just decided I would go to work in the family business and eventually look to take it over. So my interest changed.
Was he out of Miami while this is going? That's where he was operating out
Southwest Miami.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever think you wanted to be a pilot, or you always kind of had that knack for talking and sales and kind of figure running the business was more your end rather than the
I was
other?
more interested in running the business, but I was more interested in the repair shop aspect of it,
Okay.
more hands-on. And I was beginning to study airframe and power plant because that licensing would let me do more with CSDs and some other things if we ran our own repair shop, which would
Right.
benefit the company. And the industry was doing amazingly well. And so I worked for my father's company for a while. And then unfortunately, September 11th occurred. The industry tanked after that.
Right.
And so I went back to my education roots, and I had been studying biology as a second major. And I loved it. I loved biology, environmental science. And so actually went in to see my college counselor, Dr. Fred Prince at University of South Florida, who's no longer there.
Okay.
And Dr. Prince looked at my transcript, true story, and said, son, you either know a little bit about everything or a whole lot about nothing. And he looked at my credits and he said, listen, I can get you done this semester. And he said, have you ever thought about an intro to elementary ed course? And I said, absolutely not. I've never thought about education. I said, I'll go work in a lab somewhere or something if I have to. And he said, are you single? And I said, how is that relevant? He goes, I'm looking at the course roster. It's all girls in there. And I said, well, I'm single. So I signed up for it. I walk out. My best friend was sitting in the waiting room. And he goes, so what's the deal? I said, well, I'm taking a class next semester. I said, you're going to take it with me. He goes, why would I take it? I said, because you're single too. And I had to tell him the story. But that's how it started. And I actually did an internship at a pre-K center
Okay.
as part of that experience and absolutely fell in love with public education after that.
So my son has his A&P license, and he got it through Travis
Right.
Tech, and he had gone to work for Draken here, and got laid off after they had 5 rounds of layoffs. He made it to the 5th one, but he got laid off earlier this year, and he's back with another company out of Bartow and doing the same thing. But that's what he did, and you know, he hated school. But when he got into technical school where he was doing stuff with his hands, he was making all A's. I mean, 95 A's, not 90 A's, not 88 on a curve. He was doing fantastic. So
Right.
I'd love for you to meet him sometime and y'all can talk about it. But big proponent of Travis and Ridge Tech and, you know, the schools that offer that type of ability and skill training.
Yeah, we offer more now than ever before. And quite frankly, you know, my wife and I joke when we first moved here and my son was entering his freshman year when we transitioned, we were showing him all the different programs and academies he could apply for. And he said, I'll just stay at George Jenkins, which was his zone school. And he does culinary and some sports there. But we joke all the time that had they had some of these experiences when
Right.
we were in school, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
I went to college because it was expected.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
and
exactly
then there
right.
weren't any other real options. And, you know, that was expected of my older brother, my younger brother, and they were much more academic minded than I was. And,
Yep.
you know, my high school graduation present was a suitcase for my mom and dad. So I said, okay, it's time for me to move on. And I always know I was home when I came home, but it was
Right.
kind of go enter the world.
Right.
I think your comment about an elementary ed teacher, you know, with being a single guy, why aren't there more? And I noticed it, you know, when my kids were going through school, I was a pretty involved dad, and I would like to go have lunch with them and be involved with the classes. There were very few men in the school, not just teachers or admin, but anyone. And I remember going and having lunch with my daughter one day, and I'm walking down the hall. She's in 2nd grade. I'm holding 4 little girls' hands, and my daughter's going, hey, that's my dad. I'd like to hold his hand. But they, you know, didn't have a man in their life. And, you know, how do we recruit more men into elementary ed? Or is it just, it is what it is?
No, there are some real barriers to more gentlemen working in especially early elementary. And some of those are stigma. I was actually counseled away from elementary by the same counselor who said, you know, Mr. Heid, Fred, you're better suited for middle school and high school. And he said, you know, there's always this unspoken rumor that males in elementary are out of place. And why are you trying to work with young children? So I think a lot of that stigma's gone away.
Good.
But earning potential is the biggest barrier. most of them want to be able to earn additional revenue through stipends for coaching and things like that. The present elementary schedule doesn't allow them to do that after work. And so I think there are some real barriers there for earning potential that are keeping them from doing that, which is why we've been so focused on increasing pay over the last 3 years. And successfully, if the board approves it next Tuesday, we'll see another 6% raise across the board for our teachers.
So when you were a teacher, were you that guy that stood up on the desk and was shouting and yelling and, look at me, trying to get the kids' attention, or were you more stoic and just here's your assignment? What was your style?
So I taught science in middle school, and I loved the middle school years. I loved the quirkiness about it, but I was a very hands-on teacher. We had 1 day a week where we did traditional or old school kind of approach where we'd utilize our textbooks, take notes, prepare for quizzes and tests, and catch up on labs. But the rest of the week, it was all hands-on.
Right.
My kids rotated to different lab stations. That's how they learned. Far more kinesthetic application. Even their assessments, I didn't test in a traditional way, but just paper and pencil. When we did anatomy in 8th grade, anatomy and physiology, I actually put the bones out. I put organs out, and the kids had to identify them. And so more like what you would see at the secondary level.
Right.
So I was never on the desk kind of guy, but I did bring a level of excitement to my class that I think my kids truly appreciated. And I was fortunate to teach on a block schedule, so I had 90 minutes. And so I could do those kinds of labs and activities with my kids. And we did everything. We did genetics with learning. Kids had to learn how to cross-pollinate with Drosophila and fruit flies and how to create different outcomes, physical characteristics, what are the genetics for red eyes versus yellow eyes. And the students would learn that, but they would apply it. And so I think my kids in a Title I school did exceptionally well because I gave them the opportunity to apply themselves with a hands-on approach versus just traditional, let's open up the book and talk about science today. We actually applied the sciences each day.
Did you coach while you were in middle school?
Briefly.
Football or wrestling or something else?
Track. Shot put.
Okay.
And so I coached that briefly, but I did a lot of after-school activities. My principal came to me very early on because of the level of engagement I had with my kids, and asked if I'd be willing to forfeit my planning period and pick up an extra class so he could put more kids in my class. And I said, absolutely. And then after school, I did a lot of clubs and activities for my kids. So it was not uncommon for me to be there working with kids on robotics until 6:30. Their parents would pick them up, and then we'd be done for the day. But
I've got a buddy in Winter Haven that he graduated my older brother, and he was the same kind of guy, maybe not to that extent, but he was the guy standing on the desk named Bill Lockhart, played baseball in high school with my older brother. His brother and I were best man, or I was the best man in his brother's wedding. So our families grew up together, but he was a lot like that, where hands-on, lots of activity, you're not going to be bored in my classroom.
Yeah, and I actually stole that from Michael Gurian is a brain-based researcher, and I happened to go to a conference once and sat in on a session with him and his wife. And he actually showed some video footage of infants sitting in car seats, and they would flash images on the wall. And every time the baby would react and pull the string, it would change the image. And they did this study over 100 or so subjects. And what they found was female infants, if they saw a picture of their mom or their dad, they would stop there. Yet the male brain, in order to maintain that stimulus, right, they just keep pulling on the string. So if you think about it now, how wives will, tease you about you change the channel too often. There's some truth, and he called it a Neanderthal brain effect, that essentially the male brain has to constantly have stimulus or it starts to shut down. And they had CAT scan and MRI images of all of this. And so for me, I applied that to my classroom. Is when do kids most often get in trouble in the classroom? When they're bored, when they disengage. I didn't give you the chance to disengage. I kept you busy and moving from station to station, so I kept you engaged the entire class period. And it was very successful as a result. So
my problem is I just couldn't fight my genetics. I was predisposed to get bored. I wish you'd have been my teacher in 7th and 8th grade. Yeah. You came here in April of 21. It's the height of COVID. You got political interest in local school boards by national politics and state politics. You were kind of in it but you came here. How have you been holding up since you got here? You've been here, what, a couple of years now?
Yeah, going into my third year. I think we're holding up well. I think you have to, you have to listen to every issue, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. Right. And I think that's what I try to pride myself on is be receptive, but look for the truth in the middle, and how do we best address that?
Right.
So when I arrived here, the concern about masking and COVID was really just about choice. So it was an easy decision to say, okay, parents, we were 2 full years out coming into COVID at that point. A lot more information, a lot more research, vaccines were becoming available. We had different safety protocols in place in our schools. And so there was a comfort knowing that, okay, we can empower parents to have that choice option in their classrooms. And I think it was well received at the time. The politics are the politics everywhere right now.
Right.
And I think there's 2 reasons. Number one, education's always been an easy target. And number 2, it's the closest to your local electors.
Absolutely.
Because we are right here ever present every day. Right. So we're the closest, quote unquote, political group that you can voice your concerns with. And so I think people are taking advantage of that now. I think Florida's moved in a very positive direction with empowering parents.
Good.
And I think we've shown and reflected that we're supporting that and giving parents far more choice and input than ever before. And since I arrived here, one of my biggest phrases that I use all the time is we've got to move parents from being passengers in their kids' education, where we just tell them everything,
right,
and get them to be partners in their kids' education. And I think we're starting to see that shift. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that there are times where the issues are difficult. Even with well-intended legislature, at times they'll adopt policies that they really should probably ask a little bit.
Well-intended, but often overreaching.
Oh, absolutely. Local control in certain areas, but even just about the implementation.
Right.
Something as silly as this year, the no nickname or the nickname issue, where we're not allowed to call a student by law by anything other than their legal name unless the parent gives us permission. And so there were a lot of parents that you'd be surprised at what some of them wrote down on the nicknames we were allowed to call their kids. And we can't do that because it's profanity.
Can you call them their last name?
We can.
Okay. Because I got called by my last name a lot by teachers. Sometimes you just it's whatever name they can think of when they're trying to get your attention. I never took.
But something as simple as that, which was very much intended to address other issues as far as pronouns and other issues, is too overreaching, and I don't think they ever realized the implications and the burden that places on a school district, especially when you authorize it after the school year starts.
Right.
And so you're trying to play catch up. So I think those are the points of frustration is we wish there would be a little bit more time and an understanding for implementation.
Right.
Again, the policy is the policy, but we need time to implement it effectively.
I was one of the parents who tried to be involved with my kid's school, not just a passenger, but a participant. And when my kids were starting middle school and kind of going in there is when school uniforms came about. And I was a single dad, and I've told this story a number of times, is I was a big fan of it because I didn't have to worry about what matched. I just knew don't put maroon pants with a maroon shirt. Have something that breaks it up. But you could wear, you got 3 or 4 choices for shirts and 3 or 4 pants. You get them a belt and your kid's fine. But I noticed that a lot of parents were objecting to the uniform. And I said, I bet they don't even know what their math or English curriculum that their kid's doing, but they know they want to fight that they can wear jeans or khakis or whatever it was. And I think it's just because they didn't know how and didn't understand they had a choice in getting involved in their education. But by God, they can make a comment about, if everyone's got to wear the same things, and I don't want my son or my daughter being, part of the system. I want them having the individuality. So the challenges that you and your teachers and your administrators and everyone in the school face every day, funding, the discipline in the schools, parents, your school board, how do you deal with the stress when you go home? How do you help your team deal with stress? Because it's got to be in your face every day.
It is.
Because it's personal with parents. On the end I was on politics as an elected official, it's financial, it's professional. Every so often get personal, but it's all personal with you guys.
Yeah, and remember, we're not dealing with a commodity.
Correct.
And I think that's the difference. We're dealing with someone's child.
Right.
And so you're going to get the mama bear and the papa bear more often than not. And rightfully so, because they're advocating on behalf of their child. And, sometimes you just hope that they'll take a step back and get a little bit more information before they react. But for us, so number one, you protect your staff. We carry at the district office, we carry the burden of having to shoulder the responsibility of new legislation and policies and procedures and the school finance, and we make sure that we continue to strive and demonstrate to our staff and all of our employees. We have almost 14,000 employees that we are committed to them and we support them. So we do, I hate to use a sports analogy, but I will. I see my job as I have to do the downfield blocking so that everybody else can do their job.
Right.
And then you diffuse responsibilities. So no one person carries more than they can. With my team, I protect their time. So unless the world is absolutely on fire, I don't call you or text you after hours, and I don't call or text you on weekends because that's their time. They need that time to rejuvenate, to refresh, to spend with their family, their loved ones, in hobbies, whatever else they do to reinvigorate themselves. And they need that time to be protected. And we do try to do the same thing for our staff, protect them from issues that, quite honestly, are just going to interfere and add more to their plates, an already very full plate. For myself, I have a family. I really work very hard, as much time as I commit to the school district, 80 plus hours a week easily into weekends. My wife works very closely with my administrative assistant, my executive assistant, so that if something's coming up for my son or my wife has an event with her job, that I'm there as a husband or I'm there as a dad. And so that's how we find that balance. And then the stress is...
At the end of the line, that's how you're going to be graded.
Absolutely.
That's the only thing that matters.
Absolutely.
Are you there for your family?
Especially my boy.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have been together 30 years. We're going on 29 years married. And I couldn't ask for a better partner in this life. And she's my champion. She's, as she says, she's president of the Fred Heid fan club. So she's always there for me.
That's such a wonderful leadership style that you have. And I'm not sure all leaders are as committed to their team as that. They may say they are, they may want to be, but it's hard to have that total commitment. And whereas something has fallen down, you say, hey, we can deal with it tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning, or we can deal with it on Monday unless the house is burning down. And, I hope your team appreciates that from everyone that's there. And, but that's a really remarkable style, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
I think that'll serve you and it'll serve your team very well too. And it's got to elicit a level of respect from the folks that work for you and put their faith in you, that you trust them as, hey, we'll take care of this when we got to take care of it. But you go home and be a parent, be a husband or wife, or mom or dad or whatever it is.
And one of the early lessons I learned is as a young leader, and thank you for the gift, because I'm always interested in learning and expanding my leadership styles. But I learned early on, you had to let go of having everybody do it the way you would do it. So my role is to define what the outcome needs to be. Here's what needs to be accomplished. I don't care how you get there. Keep me looped in. But I'm not going to micromanage you. As a senior administrator, you're in your role because you should be entrusted. You've demonstrated the skills, the aptitude, the trust. I'm going to empower you in your role and just make sure you get the outcome. And if you run into barriers that I need to help you with or help problem solve with, then I'm here for you.
Right.
But I try not to micromanage them. And I learned that lesson early on. That was something because I was always involved, and I want to be a hands-on leader.
Right.
But there's a fine line between being hands-on and trying to own everything, and it's just not possible.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, Contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Once again, that's svnsaunders.com or by phone at 877-518-5263.
Something Senator J.D. Alexander told me on a number of occasions when I was as an elected official, is he said, Todd, your job as a county commissioner is so much more difficult than his as state senator, just because they can touch you here. Mm-hmm. They can reach out and touch you, and you're local, and you go to church with them, you go to school with them, you meet them, your kids are cheerleading after school, and, yours is even more personal than what I went through. I can only imagine how difficult drawing that line is for your team. And it sounds like you're working hard to help give your team that balance, which will, I think, serve them and their families so much better. And,
Absolutely.
A stable home life makes for a much more stable classroom life. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking if the parent if the teacher or administrator comes in with a level mood, that's better than a kid coming in going, hey, I wonder, is Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones coming in? So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
I got a tour of the school board a month or so ago from Jason Pitts, your deputy superintendent, and I went online and I told you this right before we went on air. He's got his picture as Tom Selleck on Facebook. And I had to look and say, did someone hack his account? Because he doesn't look anything like Tom Selleck. I just found that absolutely hilarious. Eli, our producer, looks more like Tom Selleck than Jason does.
I've been compared to him several times.
You have?
Yep.
The old Tom Selleck or the new one?
The old one.
The old one, back in your Ferrari days? Well, we'll see about that. But as we were touring around, I saw Bigfoot stickers in your office. I've seen them on, like a clipboard or whatever. And Jason said, you're a Bigfoot fanatic. So I got to go there for a little bit. Are you a believer in Bigfoot? Do you think he really exists?
So,
I can do a whole show on this because my mom has started watching Bigfoot shows on TV, and I watched them with her the other night. I'm like, good Lord.
So I think growing up, I'm going to go way back, and hopefully most of your listeners remember Steve Austin.
Absolutely.
And the episode where he goes in the mountain and he actually finds a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot. It's just, I had this early fascination with Bigfoot. And where my office came from is when we first moved here, our moving truck was delayed by almost 3 weeks. So we were living
from Illinois.
Oh, yes, sir. So we were living on inflatable air mattresses. I think we had one lamp. We had patio furniture for our living room furniture. And so there was that weekend, I was looking for something to do, take the family out. And it was our inaugural year of the Bigfoot convention here.
Okay.
So we attended.
We have a Bigfoot commission.
We do.
In Polk County?
Yes, sir. We're going into year 3 this year. And I brought it back and I kind of used it in one of the first principles. I shared the story of going and a lot of things we saw. And, but I shared, it's like chasing that letter grade, that school grade. It can be elusive. It exists, but it's hard to find and it's hard to prove. And so it resonated with my principles, but that didn't stop the influx of Bigfoot stickers and everything else.
Okay.
I do believe, I want to believe that something like that can exist still. And, it seems silly, especially for someone with a background in education and that, but I think it's the same with ghosts and UFOs.
Absolutely.
I just think a little bit broader that way. And I would love for that to be real.
What's the difference between Bigfoot and Sasquatch? And is it just the part of the country that you're in? Is that
I think that's the name.
The Northwest is Sasquatch.
So we have skunk ape here, especially in Central Florida, Everglades and swampy areas. Then you have Sasquatch, you have Bigfoot, and then the Yetis are typically in Asia and colder regions. You'd be surprised to learn, and I won't disclose who it is, but one of our employees has actually written 3 books on Sasquatch.
Really?
And has gifted me a copy of each. Yes. And so he's big into it too. So.
Well, not to downplay it, but I would think that the best film we've ever seen is worse than the Zapruder film. We have game cams that we set out
sir.
in the woods to catch deer, wild game that are clearer than the best image of Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or whatever. I'm happy to loan you some cameras next time you go camping or whatever.
Have you seen Harry and the Hendersons?
I have.
You have?
I have.
I think I know what the movie is. I've never seen it. I've seen, what is it? The Jack Link's hot sausage or
Yeah.
beef jerky with Sasquatch. I think that's pretty funny.
You know what I think it is, though, and like I said, I want to believe. I think that's that part of your childhood you don't want to let go of, which is, can you still believe in something fantasy-like that maintains that childhood aspect of your life? And for me, it's the hope that something like that could still exist. And we think about it. We discover new species every year.
Right.
It's amazing what we can discover in our oceans and in our jungles and other areas. And so, it's always that, why not?
Well, I think having an aspirational person in leadership like you is important. So I don't mean to downplay that. I find it interesting that you gravitated towards Bigfoot instead of the $6 million man. You would think most kids would want to be that guy that could jump over buildings and, have that bionic shrink. But you kind of gravitated to Bigfoot. I think that's fun.
Yes, sir.
Does your family share the same fascination with it?
No.
Okay.
My son does to a certain extent. My wife, not at all. Not at all. They tease me about it all the time.
Well, I think aspiration, having that kind of lightheartedness serves you well.
Thank you.
It I think it's pretty neat. And I have not heard about the Bigfoot convention. Eli, maybe you can go there one day and represent us.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good idea.
Okay. So I want to go through something kind of new. It's called a lightning round. I want to ask you some questions, and you can give quick answers or you can expound on them.
Perfect.
But just to find out a little bit more about you, are you a good reader?
I am.
Do you like fiction or nonfiction?
So more and more, I'm leaning towards nonfiction. I love reading biographies and more on history and especially the early development of our nation and its principles, its founding principles. I'm really intrigued by that. But I find it cyclical. I'm a big science fiction fan as well, so I'll kind of bounce back and forth between genre. But I tend to read more nonfiction, especially in my job. There's a lot of research papers and things like
Right.
that you end up reading. So
I would think the nonfiction is more important because it's about real life things.
Correct.
And the fiction is more of a release, kind of, hey, I got to have a break from reality, and I need to just read something that's mindless that, doesn't change my life.
yeah, there's vacation and
Right. What's your favorite food?
oh wow, barbecue.
Where do you like to eat here?
So right now, Four Rivers is strong.
Yep.
And that's one of my newest favorites. I like Mission Barbecue as well. I try to find more of the mom and pop type places because I want to give them the business, number one.
Right.
They tend to be smaller instead of chains, but some of their food's better.
Yep. I've got a good buddy I went to high school with called Jimmy Rabe, Smoking Jims on Havendale Boulevard. If you ever get over, it's between Auburndale and Winter Haven. Excellent. He caters most of our family things, so he's really good. Do you like to travel?
I do. I'm not a good flyer.
It's probably hard as you work.
Yeah, I'm not a good flyer.
No.
I'm a very impatient. My wife says she's got 2 toddlers. When my son was born, when we traveled, she had to pack toys and snacks for him, just like she did me. And just to keep me, because I'm just somewhat impatient when it comes to travel, and especially nowadays. There's no such thing as fast travel with TSA and everything else you have to go through. But we travel quite a bit. We just went to Charleston, South Carolina, had a great time there. Got to do some fishing, redfish, and did well. And we go to New York a lot, where my wife's from, to visit family as her parents are getting older. And so we find that we split most of our time between those 2 areas.
Do you like freshwater fishing or saltwater fishing?
I'm a saltwater flats guy all day long. Trout, redfish, snook, that's my
Where's
game.
your favorite place to fish in Florida?
So because I did so much of it, Boca Grande.
Yep.
So I taught in Sarasota County for quite a long time, and it was the best lifestyle ever because I was done at 2:45 in the afternoon during tarpon season. I could be on the water by 3:45,
Right.
chasing tarpon on the beaches. And then during the summers, You had nothing but time
Right.
to fish. And so I did a lot of fishing Boca Grande, found a lot of triple tail. You know, winters you get inshore grouper because if you knew where to look. I mean,
Right.
you figure out the pattern. So I think time is what made that one of my favorite places. And now, even now, we trailer over to Bradenton area to fish.
Does your son like to fish?
He does.
Good.
He does. My wife does too.
Good. So you got all three of you on the boat at the same time. That's probably really means more than the actual fishing that
That
you do.
time is crucial.
What's your favorite movie?
So I'm a John Wick fan.
Okay.
I just love that series, that genre. I think Heat is a close second, and outside of that, it's going to have to be Star Wars,
But not Harry and the Hendersons.
not Harry and Anderson.
Sorry, Eli.
Not a big Redfoot reference in any of those, no sir.
Eli, bringing it in from left field. So, if they did a movie on your life, who would play you?
Oh, Russell Crowe
Russell Crowe.
or Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the two.
Russell Crowe is the Gladiator, or Russell Crowe now?
I'll take Russell Crowe as the Gladiator.
I would take that too. What's your favorite sport to watch?
College football
College football.
all day long.
Miami or
I'm a
what's your-
Florida State fan.
Florida State fan?
And University of South Florida. That's my alma mater.
Right.
So I try and watch them, even though we took a shellacking last week. But so I grew up a Florida State fan, and that's who I follow, and I follow University of South Florida. But I just love college ball, especially those games where the rivalries are so
Right.
strong, and anybody could be the winner regardless of
Right.
ranking. And I think this year we've seen so many shakeups. And
Well, I'm a Gator. My dad was a Gator. Everyone in his family were Gators except for his sister-in-law. My two brothers were. Everyone we are. And I cannot stand FSU. And everyone says, well, you should want FSU to win every game until they come to Florida. I said, no, I want FSU to be 0-10 when they come here, and I want to be 0-11 when they leave. I don't care about them. So I've never quite been able to get over that FSU thing, and they're riding high right now.
yeah,
So
we're having a good season. So
music. You like music?
I do.
What kind of music you like? Who's your favorite band?
So I grew up, in the era I grew up, I'm an 80s, 90s kind of rap, hip hop, and R&B. Anita Baker, Luther Vandross. I mean, that's what I grew up listening to in my house. Not the rap and the R&B. That wasn't my parents. But
Right.
my mom's Hispanic, and so there was always a lot of Spanish music on, but also a lot of R&B on in the house. And so she would, as she cleaned the house on weekends, the stereo was always blasting. And
Do you dance the salsa?
so I do.
Then you need to go dancing with Dr. Angela Falconetti because that's her favorite style of dancing. You two should be on Dancing with the Stars or Dancing for Pep or whatever the fundraiser is here. That would be amazing. We'll see if we can figure that out. How do you de-stress in life? Fishing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Spending time with your family, it sounds like. Do you meditate? Do you do yoga? Or is it really, I just either need to be alone for 10 minutes before I walk in the house and just breathe deep, and then I'm husband Fred, I'm dad Fred, and I'm not Superintendent Fred when you walk in the door.
So I'll add, I exercise quite a bit. I go to the gym a lot. And I can put my headphones in, put my hoodie on, move some heavy weight, and nobody talks to you. It's a good hour and a half of just de-stress.
Well, now you can listen to Todd's podcast. Subscribe, rate,
Review, comment, follow.
whatever Eli says.
Absolutely. And then it's funny you mentioned that about going in the house. I do not bring work in the house.
That's awesome.
So if I have to sit in my truck for 5 or 10 minutes just to let everything go or finish a phone call, like I won't walk into the house mid-call. I think that's rude. And so when I walk in the door, I'll check my phone periodically. And if I get a text message from a board member or a phone call, I'll take that.
Right.
But it's rare. My board is also very respectful of my time.
That's
and,
awesome. Having a good board is the key to your success. In my
It
opinion.
is.
And they
It
can
is.
make any superintendent's life a living hell, or they can make it, hey, we're all teammates on this thing, and we all have different roles. So I'm glad to hear that, because I don't think that's always been that way at our Polk County
And
School
people
Board.
don't realize you're nurturing 7 different relationships, and each one of them has unique personality. You have to figure out each one of their interests, their way of work, their preferences in communication. Some are late night owls, some are early morning risers, and you work to really build a positive relationship. And I think some people too look at school board meetings from time to time and they're like, oh, they're in conflict. No, we're in debate,
Right.
and we shouldn't all think alike. And so I appreciate our board, especially, our board members spend a lot of time, and I don't think they get enough credit. Any board member who dedicates themselves in service to our community like that spends a lot of time reviewing and pondering and asking tough questions, and sometimes they do it publicly because they feel like they want to get it on the record, and that's fine. I have very thick skin. So,
You know what? I think the key to it is being professional. If you treat your fellow board members as a professional, if they treat your staff as professionals, professionalism will be afforded to them as well.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that when I was on the county commission, and yeah, you can have arguments. I mean, we didn't have 5-0 votes on everything. Sometimes I was happy to lose 4-1. I mean, it's okay. And then we would all go to lunch.
right.
And we didn't talk about it. We put it behind us. We said our piece. We debated, and if you lost, and you might win the next one. And it sounds like that's what you enjoy, and our county enjoys from our leaders on the school board is, hey, we can have healthy debate. Sometimes it may even get heated or contentious, but so long as when it's done, everyone treats everyone professional. That's how you've got to be.
Correct.
On anything, especially if you're in public. And you're right, some school board members, some commissioners, they say, I want my opinion on the record, no matter how bombastic it may be or how out of left field, but I want people to know why I did what I did. And you got to respect that.
Yeah, and they have to respect each other. I think
Correct.
you raise really the critical piece there is, and think about society. We've really lost this ability to have a debate.
I call it statesmanship.
Yeah.
In politics, there's no statesmanship left.
There's no such thing as agreeing to disagree anymore, or we can have a disagreement and still be friends or be friendly. I don't have to subscribe to all your same ideas and thoughts, but we can still be friends. And right now, you're finding that that's become harder and harder for people. And they're so entrenched in their ideology that they can't see the other side, and they're not willing to give grace any longer. But that's really the characteristic of a strong board member. Can I get my opinions across? Will I be receptive of someone else's ideas, even if I don't agree with them? And then can we be collegial after the fact? Right. That's what defines a good board member, and a good interaction between them and between the superintendent's office and our board members. And we have that here.
So you've got 7 board members. Do you think that's the right amount?
I do. For a district our size, again, having worked in Illinois as a superintendent for 7 years, you got to realize they have 830 plus school districts. And while some would argue that smaller districts are better, there's a redundancy in expenditures that occurs. And so you have to find that perfect size. And so
Illinois has 830 something school districts?
Yes, sir. It's not county-based system like
Good
Florida
Lord.
is. So there's an advantage here. You get an economy of scale almost, arguably. We're the 7th largest, 116,000 students, almost 117,000 students now. We're growing head and shoulders every year. In order to address that and create better equity amongst our board members, they're in the middle of discussion right now for redistricting based off population density. Right. And so that's been a long time coming, and they've been discussing this since 21.
So that's how y'all break up the districts for your school board.
Yes, sir.
Is student population in general, the number of schools, how do you...
Population in general.
In general.
Yes, sir.
And that's how we did it at the county is we tried to get within 1.5% of
Correct.
Taking the total number, divide it by 5. And sometimes the line moved, and we did that every, 7 to 10 years. I forgot what it was. And it happened once when I was there, and it's like, hey, am I still in my same district? Do I have, am I in another one? Because it's how you run, odd and even.
Correct.
And that was something the county manager made sure of, is that even when they redrew the lines, we stayed in the same district, so it didn't screw up the elections. And
we do the same thing.
Okay.
There is a little bit of gerrymandering on districts just to maintain some of that integrity. But right now, looking across the districts by school board, I think they range anywhere from 103 to 105,000 residents. So that's a pretty tight grouping, which is far better than where we are now. We have some disproportionality in the Northeast because of just where the growth has been.
Right, but you said gerrymandering, sorry.
Gerrymander.
That word.
Yes, sir.
But all your school board members run at large.
Yes, sir.
So it is, but it isn't. And the gerrymandering is more, you have to live in the district, which is what we did. But I had to know, I lived in Winter Haven. I had the northeast part of the county, but I had to know what was going on in Fort Meade and Mulberry and Frostproof, and I had to pay attention.
Correct.
And I had to be in tune with it because I'm voting on countywide issues and not just northeast Polk issues. And it sounds like that's what your school board members do is, hey, yeah, they're in charge of some schools geographically, but for the most part, all 7 are going to vote on the same issue.
Yeah, and the gerrymandering is mostly focused on trying to create better equity as far as the number of schools in each district, let alone not necessarily where they reside. But we want there to be some parity and equity amongst them, that you don't want one to have the bulk of the high schools versus somebody else has all elementary schools,
Right.
because they are at large. And our board does a very good job of addressing issues that come to them. They forward them to me, they respond, they ask for assistance with responses, and because they take their jobs very seriously that way.
I think that's a very healthy approach, because in my opinion, if you had one school board member that just had senior highs, and one that had middle, and one that had lower, and one that maybe had ESE or whatever, then you would create silos.
Oh, absolutely.
And silos are the worst thing you can create in elected leadership, be it school board, be it local politics. And so the gerrymandering is not as big of an issue on local politics as it is perhaps at the state and the federal level.
Correct.
So I think we're fortunate there.
Hey, this is County Commissioner Bill Braswell here. I'm doing the Todd's podcast. I encourage you to listen to it. It's really enlightening.
When you came in, all of a sudden you've got 7 bosses. How did you approach your relationship with each of them? Because it doesn't happen to a lot of people, but you come in with school board members with lots of opinions, lots of thoughts, lots of attitude. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. You just had to come in and you had 7 people. You had to say, how do I deal with each of these 7? Did you take them to lunch? Did you say, hey, come over and have dinner? I want you to meet my family. Or, we're going to tiptoe through this. And
So we met. We scheduled individual meetings with each of them. By then, I'd already gotten a sense of who they were, because during the interview process, I got to interview with them one-on-one. And a lot of their questions to me, I think, helped me start to understand their perspective and what their priorities were. And so that helped me. I watched a lot of their previous board meetings to watch their interactions.
And that was fun.
I talked to the community. I'm going to be honest with you. I made a comment to them when I was first interviewing, and they were asking me questions. I said, listen, I'm interviewing you right now just as much as you're interviewing me. I'm watching your body language. I'm watching how you interact with each other, because there had been a lot of animosity previously amongst some of them. And
it spilled out into the public.
Oh, yes, sir.
It was not just behind closed doors.
Correct.
It was not the most professional group.
Correct. And, so my goal was to be respectful of their interests and their needs, maintain the integrity of my position. What's my purview versus the board member's purview? And that takes a lot of relationship and trust building. It's hard to tell someone that's not your role, especially when they're your boss, or for them to tell me, hey, Mr. Heid, we're directing you to do this. And
Right.
So, I pride myself on, being very honest, being very straightforward, because, if you sugarcoat everything and you try to please everyone, you're not doing your job. And I think, what the board realizes is, I am a straight shooter. I take this job very seriously.
Right.
I'm very passionate about what we do, and I'm here to serve their interests and needs, because those are the best interests of our students.
Right.
And so long as
That's your
their
ultimate
focus,
client is the kids.
so long as that's their focus,
Right.
I'm here, and I'm here to support them.
Is school getting too complicated?
Yes.
And I say that back in the day. I mean, I'm 63, and it was, you go to school, you got an after school program, you go home. Now you got all the politics that have been interjected into it. You've got so many different ways to learn. Have we just so disaggregated the whole system that it's really hard to teach a group?
It is. There's a lot to this, and this is where I go back to where I said how we strive to protect our teachers. I see my role as I have to define the science, or the science of teaching. What has to be taught? What do kids have to know at the end of every year? How will they be assessed? We try to protect the teachers so that they can control the art of teaching. How they choose to deliver that information to our kids, we give them a lot of latitude and flexibility with, because of what you just said. There's so many different learning styles. Some kids learn hands-on. Other kids need, quiet time, and they need to just process information. And so this diverse learner group that we have, I mean, when we went to school, those didn't exist.
Right.
You sat in straight rows, you opened up your book, and every Friday we took a test or a quiz, and you got
licks in the principal's office.
I was going to say,
or the coach's office.
That's exactly right. It's a very different clientele now. And, a lot of it's good, but a lot of it has created opportunities for excuses. And I think we saw high stakes accountability, what I'm a believer in. I believe that we had systems that were failing, and kids were being ignored. And for the sake of the overall average, you can take an A-rated school, for example.
Does that mean teaching for test or testing for teaching? Testing for
teaching to the test.
Teaching to the test.
Yeah, and we have an A-rated school is probably the best example. In every A-rated school, there's probably 20% of the kids who aren't reading on grade level. Are they really an A-rated school?
Right.
And so there's these questions there, and you can hide kids in the overall average and still give the impression that everything's going great. And so my goal is not to do that. It's to pull back the curtain and say, okay, how do we get these kids to make sure? My biggest goal is when a kid walks across the stage and we hand them that piece of paper, it better mean something.
Right.
It's not a completion certificate. It means that kid's literate. They can go into the workforce, they can go into the military, they can go to higher ed, and they're going to be successful. Until we get there, we've got a lot of work to do. And we have a lot of work to do.
In my interview with Dr. Falconetti, who's president of Polk State, one of my comments to her was, the biggest smile I've ever seen on her face, and always do, is at graduation. I mean, I don't go to her graduation ceremonies, but the pictures of them, the kids have their picture, and that's got to be just the culmination of a year's worth of hard work by not just, it's got to be the culmination of all the hard work that your team does, not you, not the teachers, not the lunchroom ladies, not everybody. I mean, it is everybody. So, that's got to mean something to you that, that's your high of the year, the biggest high.
Yeah, there are two best days in the school year. The very first day of school, when everybody shows up, they're spotless, they've got their new backpacks, they got their new school materials, everybody's excited. Kids want to be in school, they want to see their friends. There's an excitement about the first day of school that I wish we could sustain the whole year. And then graduation. And you said it very well. It's the culmination of 13 years of our investment in those young adults to get them to that place. And I wish that we had the ability to have everybody who touched that child's life over the 13 years in that auditorium.
Yeah.
And getting credit for that. Because our high school teachers, who deserve a tremendous amount of credit, because getting them to the finish line is the hardest part.
In today's world, oh my God.
And they're amazing. They make tunnels for our kids when they're leaving. I mean, I'll watch them interact with our kids when they're leaving. I don't think they realize people are watching. The relationships they've built with those kids are exceptional. But I wish every teacher got to celebrate that same moment, because, as you pointed out, every custodian, every bus driver, every food nutrition worker, every one of our trades guys and women have contributed to get that kid there. And they don't get to celebrate that moment. Last year, we tried a lot of new strategies during graduation. I wore a GoPro so that, parents don't get to see the same smile I see.
Oh, absolutely.
Those kids walk across stage, they shake my hand. Half of them are sweaty hands, people who shouldn't be walking across the stage in new heels that they've never worn before, but they're dressed up for graduation. But the looks on their faces, because the parents get to see the back of the head. I get to see your face.
Right.
So we tried a lot of different things to get parents to be able to celebrate in that same moment. And they were very successful last year. So we're going to keep that process going. And because we want it to be a celebration. It's a long road to get there.
Yep.
And I always ask the students to thank their parents, because without them, they don't get there.
Right.
And
thanking your parents is so important, but you've got these kids that have no support at home. And for them to get to that point, I think is just extra special, because that path is probably considerably harder than those of us that enjoyed having two parents at home that were always there. I feel very fortunate. but those kids that just have had a real tough road, that they can still get through it. It shows such drive and perseverance and just stick-to-itiveness. That to me is wonderful. I made a comment about a lunchroom lady a minute ago. I didn't mean that way, but that's what they were back when I was there. And you said the food nutrition program, is it sufficient? And again, I know, when we were there, hey, you got lunch and you went home. Now you're feeding them for breakfast, lunch, and some of them dinner, I think. And it's just got to be, again, school's gotten so complicated. It used to be, here you got some shepherd's pie and a roll and some orange juice or milk, and you went home and you had breakfast or dinner at home. And is the nutrition program, is that a struggle? Is that just a money loser? I know it's such an intricate part of keeping these kids focused, is having food in their belly.
Right. It's a struggle from the perspective of thinking about what it's like logistically to feed 116,000 kids twice a day minimally for breakfast and lunch. There are so many now federal regulations. Like when we went to school, everything was a hot meal with the exception of maybe breakfast. Right. Even then I never had breakfast at school. I remember having scrambled eggs, grits, bacon, and a piece of toast for breakfast. And then on other days, you could pick to choose to have a sugary cereal or something like that. Now there's so many federal regulations on dietary and nutrition restrictions, so many food allergies, things like that it does complicate it quite a bit. But I give our team a lot of credit for finding menu options that are in high interest, high demand. Right. And our kids give us feedback all the time. My son's a huge critic. He loves school lunch. He loves the chicken sandwich. He likes the spicy chicken sandwich is his favorite. So he gives me good feedback. It's nice to have one of your customers in your house that you can talk to. But we get reimbursed now through COVID. We got 100% reimbursement for all of our students. Everybody's on free lunch basically. And it'll be interesting to see how
even the kids that can afford it that don't need a free lunch.
Yes, sir, at the time.
So you just deliver. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
And so, and they have to keep a lot of data. So you think about it, we typically offer 2 to 4 different menu items at every school. Right. And they track and monitor which items are most popular so that they don't run out of an item and a student doesn't go home and say, well, I didn't eat today. And that's our biggest fear is we want to make sure kids understand that there's a meal waiting for them there for breakfast and lunch. And then as you mentioned, almost all of our schools have a food pantry. Right. If they don't send the backpacks home at night, they send them home over the weekends to make sure that students and their families have something to eat over the weekend. We do a lot of that.
And hospitals are doing some of that too, is, they send a patient home, and if they don't have food in their pantry, that recovery starts faltering. And some of them, they may not have a refrigerator, so their insulin goes bad and they can't take it. So, just a social service element of what the institutions are dealing with now. People don't have any concept unless they're on your side of it, your teacher side, your administrator side, that are having to deal with it. We're kind of finishing up here, but is there anything specifically that we as citizens can do to help you? I know that I've been asked to be on a citizens advisory committee, kind of overseeing different things. And is there any shortcomings? What do we do well? What do we not do well? How can we help? But just a regular citizen, what can they do to help you? What are your immediate needs?
Volunteers, mentors. In our schools, if you've got it some time and you want to read to a student, come on in. We'll get you trained up. We'll get you in there. We make it as convenient as possible. You can do it at any location. We're trying to do now a little bit now with virtual. So if your company is willing to let you take some time to mentor and volunteer, every one of our kids now has a device. And so what we're striving to do is eliminate the travel time. Right. So if you're 45 minutes away from a school because of traffic, I don't want you wasting your entire hour just trying to get to the school. Right. We'll let you remote in with the student, with the parent's permission, and engage our kids. I would say the other biggest ask is on the workforce side. We have amazing academy programs. We have the second largest number of certified and endorsed credentialed academies in the nation, probably going to take first place either this year or next year. We have everything from LPN programs to welding, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, diesel mechanics,
A&P.
airframe and power plant, pilot's licenses, ground management for airlines. One of our newer ones now is air traffic control.
Right.
And so we keep expanding programs based off student interest and industry needs. We need more partners though. It's getting harder and harder to find people to teach those classes. And so one of the strategies we're trying to use more in Polk County is what we do with, like we do with law enforcement, where I essentially contract with the agency. I pay 80%, upwards of 80% of the salary, and then they give me the employee.
Right.
We're willing to do more of that with some of our local companies to say, hey, listen, you benefit as well as a company because you realize that your employees teaching our kids in real time are getting real industry standards right now, what's current, what's relevant. And it's almost an onboarding process for them. They get to select the best and brightest from these classes and recruit them for their business. So we really want to encourage more involvement from our local businesses and partners to say, how do we do more internships, externships? But if you want to work and partner with us and your people are willing to teach a class, we'll help you with recruitment. We'll structure the schedule so it works for you. You want to teach one period in the morning, I can create that situation for you. So we have to start blurring the lines between public-private partnerships and make it one comprehensive approach to how do we solve these problems together.
I think the greatest person in our county that rallies volunteers is Sheriff Judd. Yes, he's got an army of volunteers.
Yes.
And I look out at all the folks that retire down here. Whether I'm sure a bunch of them had been administrators. Some of them had been mentors. They've got skills. And it's like, hey, come help us. We will find a school in your area of wherever you're living, or you can, mobile in or whatever, however it is. And so if someone is interested, I don't know how many podcasters we've got that are in that world, but do they go to the Polk County School Board and go through a portal? Is that how they start the process?
So we do have an online portal, and it's a volunteer portal. So Jeanette Crowley is their contact. And if not, they're more than happy to contact my office directly, and myself or Ms. Winchester will make sure we connect them to the right people. And again, we've tried to streamline this process so that we can get them fingerprinted and background checked as quickly as possible and get them into the actual experience that they're seeking to partner with us.
But stay away from Tom Selleck.
Stay away from
Nothing
Tom
but
Selleck
trouble.
all day long. Anybody who's going to hide behind an old picture of Tom Selleck, you have to have questions about.
That kind of wraps it up here. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you either hoped I would or expected I would that I didn't get around to? Is there anything you want to tell us?
I actually, one of the questions you had earlier in your list was, where are we headed? And where are our biggest challenges? Our biggest challenges are going to continue to be the growth that we're dealing with. And as a school district, this because the committee you sat on, we're trying to be creative in how we approach that. And not just say, well, we need a new school everywhere. And we're trying to rezone and redistrict and do all the things we need to do to provide the ROI. But, with that comes infrastructure. The county is trying hard to play catch up in a growth spurt that was unprecedented and could not have been forecasted. And we're going to continue to see that. And so I think the challenges we're going to face as a school district, because we're seeing it nationally, teacher shortage, bus driver shortages, and yet we keep growing. And those would be the things I just think on our horizon for us. We're going to have to really break the mold of traditional education and have what I believe 3 tracks for kids. Kids who want to be more virtual and remote, kids who want more industry trades, and kids who want the traditional, school setting. But we're going to have to keep expanding those options and opportunities there if we're going to adequately meet the needs of our students and their families, because it's getting harder to staff.
But again, it's got to be community involvement.
Absolutely.
This community has to get behind you and the school board's efforts and what they're doing, whether it's volunteering. Y'all can't do it on your own. Money can't fix everything. Money can help and fix some things. But you have to have the resources, people resources to drive the buses, to fix the lunches and breakfasts, to coach after school. And it's got to be a rewarding experience, not just because you make an extra $1,000 a year, whatever the compensation is. It's got to be a calling, and somehow we've got to get our citizens to be out there, and not just here in Polk County, but in every school district. The citizens have to get involved, and it's different than it was back in the day, but it is what it is. So
I have to remind people all the time, the future of Polk County resides in our school system.
right.
Both public, private, and charter. And we offer plenty of options for everyone. But you have to be invested in one of those three areas if our community is going to thrive. And you know, growth is not thriving. Growth is growth. You can growth and then stagnate, as you well know, given your previous role. We want to thrive.
Right.
We want to maintain our students here. We want to prevent the brain drain and give our local employers the best possible, you know, resources and candidates. And you know, we can do that together. Right. And we've done a good job to date. We have to keep investing there. And I think there's nothing but opportunities here in this county. So thank you.
Fred, I appreciate you coming in and taking an hour or so to talk to us. You've discussed your background, how you came to Polk County.
Yes, sir.
The times I've been around you, you've been incredibly impressive, and even now more, just seeing your commitment. And it's not a mile wide and an inch deep. It's a mile wide and a mile deep. And I mean that as a compliment. This is a passion for you, and taking care of these kids and getting them to the next level. It is inherent into who you are. I want to thank your wife and your son for sharing you. I'm glad you do get to spend the time with them that you would like and that you enjoy fishing. But I appreciate you coming on Todd's podcast today and sharing your background, sharing your goals, sharing your challenges, and hopefully a call to action from our community to get more involved in what you do.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Best meeting I've had in months. And if you want me back, I'm always happy to come back. So
Would love to.
you.
I appreciate it. There's more stuff that we didn't get to today,
Yes, sir.
but time kind of limited us. So I appreciate everything you do for us, and I look forward to helping in any way that I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. Our next episode will be with County Commissioner Bill Braswell. He will tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up in Bartow, short career at University of Florida, then his flying career in the military and with Delta Airlines, and some of the issues that are facing Polk County. So I hope you'll join in next time when we interview County Commissioner Bill Braswell. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.